I've talked about British cars, American cars, German cars, Italian cars, Japanese cars. But there's one country I haven't talked about. France. An appearance with a Peugeot 205. In the 1970s, Peugeot was hit pretty hard by the gas crisis, and their 504 and 505 sedans weren't doing too well, so they made a Super Mini, which is bigger than a Mini, but smaller than a compact car, called the 104, and it was a good success, but by the time the 80s rolled around, it was quite old, competing with, newer cars like the Volkswagens and the Fiestas of the world, and they needed a successor. So in 1983, they launched the 205. Now it actually used the same X engine as the 104, which made a whopping 44 horsepower. No one said it was quick, but importantly, it was a small car, and it was an economical car, and that's what the French people needed. In fact, it was nominated for European Car of the Year, its debut year, and throughout its entire lifespan, it got minor trim upgrades, minor safety upgrades, and styling upgrades, as well as a more powerful 122 horsepower engine during the facelift at 1990. And that same year, it won Autocar's Car of the Decade. Nice going. And quite clearly it worked, because by 1994, the year they discontinued the 104, they had sold 5 million units. So, there you go. It was a success by the 206, and that's it. See ya. No. There were a few performance options available. And it started off in 1984 with the 205 GTI. This front-wheel drive hatchback, 2 doors, 1.6 liter engine, made 104 horsepower. Now I know what you're saying, but the 1990 version had 122 horsepower. Yes. However, not only is it 6 years older, it's also lighter. It weighs just 2,000 pounds because of lighter materials and a more scarcely equipped interior. But if you want toned down, not much gets crazier than the 205 Rally. This was a very limited run edition featuring a 1.1 liter i4 that was ridiculously fast, revving redline at 6,800 RPM, just like that. And it made 102 horsepower. I know, again, what are you talking about? It's slower than the Golf, than the GTI. Yeah, well, it had a little trick up its sleeve. You see, it was a proper race car for the road. It had nothing like noise reduction systems. It didn't need that. Air conditioning, that's for the weak. Wind-up windows, useless. And as a result, the already very light car got even lighter, trimmed down to a scarcely believable 1,700 pounds. That's almost as light as the original Mini, and it still had all the safety amenities needed by European regulators. That's impressive, but not as impressive as its handling. Front-wheel drive, 100 horsepower, very high grip, and thanks to that lightweight, you could absolutely chuck it through the corners. It was widely considered to be one of the most enthusiastic hatchbacks in the world at the time, and still remains a cult classic. But there's one 205 that everyone holds dear. The T16. What does that T stand for? Turbo! That's right. This 1.8 liter i4, turbocharged, made 200 horsepower and 190 torque. And unlike the Rally and the GTI, this thing was all-wheel drive, and most crucially of all, mid-engined. That's right, they got that little hatchback engine and put it in the middle. Now, it did have to get bulked up a little bit because of the wider wheelbase, the bigger engine, and the turbo, so it did weigh a hefty in comparison, 2,500 pounds. But, despite that, it did 0 to 60 in 6 seconds, did the quarter mile in 14.4, which is faster than any European car short of the Porsche 911. Dang. Oh, and they made 200 units. Why 200? Well, there was this little rally class called Group B, and they required that 200 road cars be made for homologation purposes. This was no problem. And I think you know where I'm going with this story. 1984, the 205 T16 Evo 1 blasts onto the rally stage in Group B and instantly becomes a success. Audi, with their Quattro, revolutionized rallying just 2 years ago and won the championship. Then Lancia revolutionized it again with the mid-engine 037, winning the last rear-wheel drive championship the year after that. And 1984 was Peugeot. Now, this was an actual quote by the Audi director on the ground at a rally stage. Don't stop development just because we're winning. Audi may have won the championship in 1984, but they were casting nervous glances at that 205 because its 2.5 liter i4 made 350 horsepower, 332 foot-pounds of torque at 8,000 RPM. It made 22 PSI of boost. And in 1985, just a year later, Ari Vatanen took the lead at the Monte Carlo Rally and won by a scarcely believable 5.5 minutes. Oh, and by the way, they won the championship that year, too. But the best was yet to come. 1986, Audi was firing back with the turbocharged i5 Quattro S1. But the 205 was back at it as well with the Evo Dos. Now officially it ran 550 horsepower on the stages, but rumors run around that it's Formula 1 turbo. Yeah, that's right, they put a Formula 1 turbocharger on that thing. Could bump power up to 650. That is twice as much power as the current World Rally cars have. And they put a bigger wing on it, with better aerodynamics. They had double vented disc brakes all around. And, despite all this, it weighed just 2,050 pounds. As you might expect, all-wheel drive, lightweight, crazy power, means it goes 0 to 60 on dirt in less than 3 seconds. In 1986, the Ferrari F40 could do 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds on tarmac. That kind of says it all. Oh, and they won the rally championship that year as well. Unfortunately, that was just in time for Group B to be banned due to several incidents, shall we say. And Peugeot was left with a kick-butt rally car and no rally. Luckily, there was a transcontinental race going on called Dakar. Ever heard of it? It's only the toughest off-road endurance race on the planet. And the 205 was prime candidate for it, but first they had to do some modifications. They lengthened the wheel banks, beefed up the chassis and suspension, added a 350-liter endurance fuel tank on it. And with that combined weight, it weighed a massive 3,500 pounds. And it only had 330 horsepower, but it was more reliable that way. And to show you just how good the T16 was at Dakar, in the first 10 miles, Ari Vatanen blew a tire out in Paris streets and basically started the race in 247th place. Despite that, him and his team of 3 other vehicles won the rally in 1987, and they followed up that with another successful victory in 1988. You know, you start in 274th, you end up in 1st. That's not a bad win. The 405, which was the spiritual successor to the 205, in a sense, because it also competed at Dakar, and it basically was recycled parts of a 205 thrown into a new body style. And then it raced up Dakar again, and it won twice in 89 and 90. And that was not the only vehicle to be inspired by the 205. I'm talking about the Citroen ZX Dakar, which won 4 times in a row, and used parts inspired by that 205. So in a way, the 205 has been directly linked to over 6 Dakar Rally victories. Speaking of victories, Pikes Peak. Audi was on a winning streak there, over in America Land at the most difficult hill climb on Earth. And Peugeot won a slice of that pie. So, they were hoping to end Audi's 2-year winning streak in 87. And they had the tools to do it. The 205 T16 Pikes Peak Edition made over 600 horsepower with 43 PSI of boost. And it weighed just 1,800 pounds, because it didn't meet any of those pesky rally regulations. But there was a problem. The Audi had aerodynamics. Crazy aerodynamics. The Peugeot did not. As a result, it was running 4 seconds slower in qualifying. So, this is no joke. They found some pieces of aluminum, made a DIY front splitter, and shoved it on the front of the Peugeot. And it did improve, but it was still slower than the Audi. So, the driver, Ari Vatanen, had an idea, and he literally got some aluminum, bolted it on to the roof, and kept going, but he decided that wasn't enough. So again, I'm not kidding you about this. They made another wing, bolted that wing on top of the wing, on top of the car, and then ran it up the course. This sort of DIY aero kit did the trick in this final round of qualifying. It was over 4 seconds faster than the Audi. But tragedy would strike during the actual event. A turbo hose fell off on its way up Pikes Peak, and it came in 2nd place because of the loss of turbo pressure. So Audi would claim another victory by 7 seconds. But they did not give up. They came back in 1988, and they won it again. Then they came back in 1989, and guess what? They won it again. And then it was done. That would be the last championship victory of the 205 in 1989, and it would retire from racing altogether. The 205 was never the prettiest or the most powerful, but its sheer rally speed and innovation cannot be understated. The T16 name is an icon not just for the 205, but for the 405, for the 206, and for most recently the 208. It is a legend, and it all started with a little French hatchback in need of some fuel savings.